Over the years, Dead by Daylight has amassed a large amount of perks. One of the many side effects from introducing a massive number of perks into the game is that some perks will naturally lose value simply from being outclassed by newer ones. On the flip side of this, sometimes old perks that were once considered obsolete can find new life when combined with the power of a newer perk. And then there's some perks that consistently remain either strong or weak, with their overall power only changing with a rework of some kind. And unfortunately, perk reworks aren't super common, so some perks are left waiting in perpetuity for even the chance of a rework. As more and more perks have been introduced over the years, it's become very easy to create specific builds that revolve around the stacking of multiple perks that center around similar or related functions. For example, a simple healing build can be created by using the perks We're Gonna Live Forever, Botany Knowledge, Desperate Measures, and Empathic Connection. This build allows for fast heals on both slugged and injured survivors, all of which makes the action of healing an afterthought during the course of a match. Another easy build idea is one that revolves around repair speeds, with perks like Deja Vu, Resilience, Overzealous, and Prove Thyself all boosting repair speeds in different ways. Now welcome the idea of Diminishing Returns, a new formula that will exist behind the scenes of every DBD match. In short, the system is being introduced to limit the stacking of several values and modifiers. Values like haste, healing, and repair speeds, for instance, will now have limitations when multiple perks that impact the same value are concurrently active. To quote the PTB patch notes, the gameplay modifier with the highest absolute value is always applied, while lesser ones are progressively lowered to a percentage of their original value. In other words, the game will now prioritize the highest value first, with the strength of the lower values being diminished. The introduction of the diminishing return system comes only 1 year after the attempted removal of haste and hinder stacking back during the PTB for patch 8.7. At the time, I was strongly opposed to the removal of haste and hinder stacking, and I was happy to see that change be reverted before the patch went live. I remain opposed to the outright removal of haste and hinder stacking, and thankfully the diminishing return system is not fully removing that functionality. In fact, the idea of diminishing returns itself makes me even more relieved that haste and hinder stacking wasn't removed. A middle ground solution for haste stacking was clearly there, it just needed more time to be fully fleshed out. Moreover, I was also curious to see the devs notate that diminishing returns will help solve some game balancing woes. To quote from the patch notes, it was stated that diminishing returns will help the developers create new interesting powers, items, and perks with the current roster of existing game modifiers, with far less risk of creating unintended game-breaking scenarios. While I do agree that diminishing returns will likely help reduce this risk, this dev note also supports my viewpoint on diminishing returns, which is this. Diminishing returns only helps prop up the one area that DBD's balancing manages to get somewhat correct, which is anything that involves number adjustments. Consequently, diminishing returns will not fundamentally change the meta for the better without supplemental balance changes that do not involve number adjustments. Simply put, the idea of diminishing returns is a much better idea on paper, but in reality, it has a high risk of becoming a meaningless formula. Why do I believe this? Well, as of the 9.6 PTB, diminishing returns only weakens the already average and weak perks, with the strongest meta builds prevailing unscathed. Healing and repair builds like the ones previously mentioned sound scary good in theory, but these types of builds are only the most valuable in specific situations or against certain killers. To be clear, building out a survivor loadout that focuses mostly in one area or function can be extremely good in niche scenarios. However, there's too many unpredictable elements that can prevent these types of builds from always being useful. The type of killer, the type of map, and the killer's playstyle are not always the same. And while there are certain killers and certain maps that tend to appear more often than others, there's never a guarantee on what each trial will bring. Builds that center around a specific function like healing or repairing can be very useful, or at least feel valuable in some way. But sometimes these kinds of builds can be totally irrelevant to how a match ends up playing out. For instance, if you brought a healing or repair build but spent almost the entire match being chased by the killer, the chance of at least one of those perks being valuable would probably be quite slim. That's part of the magic with DBD. Some matches you'll be thankful you brought a specific loadout of perks, and then some matches you'll be wishing you had a more generic loadout for better coverage. Given the unreliable expectations for a typical DBD match, why risk bringing a build that only focuses on one action or function when the choice of a much more reliable, safer, and stronger build exists? Perhaps a reliable build that involves perks like Dead Hard, Unbreakable, Deliverance, and Decisive Strike. Or how about a strong build that involves Conviction, Shoulder the Burden, Sprint Burst, and Vigil? Or what about a safer build that features Lithe, Resilience, Finesse, and 5 moves ahead? In most matches, a build that allows survivors multiple second chances and/or enhanced performance during a chase offers the best opportunity for escaping. Builds that are more generalized and provide coverage for the most common actions and functions have always been the best to bring. So why would a survivor bring a build that revolves around maxing out haste or healing? The main reason is that it's fun. It's also nice to serve a specific purpose in a match, as a healer or as a haste enthusiast, because it can provide last-second support to save a fellow survivor. Personally speaking, I believe the safer and stronger builds are boring. There's never a true sense of danger if you have second chance perks shoved up your ass, and there's never a true feeling of outplaying the killer when those same perks help extend chases or health states. And sure, having a build focused on maxing out haste or healing isn't all that innovative or fun for the killer at certain points in a match. However, many of the haste perks, for instance, require very specific scenarios or time to set them up in order to get the most value. Furthermore, stacking healing or repair speed perks does little to no good in extending chases or health states. If anything, the stacking of these perks only works best when the match is already looking like a victory for the survivors. The much more reliable, safer, and stronger builds that provide second chances and easier chases work best in virtually every scenario. If the survivors are losing, these builds can turn the game around. If the survivors are winning, the builds can help effortlessly secure a win. No matter the situation, the strongest and safest survivor builds will always be reliable. With all of this in mind, which perks will be the most impacted by diminishing returns? Will perks like Dead Hard, Unbreakable, Deliverance, or Sprint Burst be impacted? Currently, the answer is no. Meanwhile, perks that are only super valuable when combined together will be impacted by diminishing returns. A perfect example of a perk that will be crushed by diminishing returns is Road Life. Who the hell is using Road Life as it stands right now? While a 100% boost to healing sounds nice at first glance, the perk is cursed with a highly restrictive step-by-step instruction manual in order to be even somewhat reliable. This perk is only worth running as part of a self-care build, but the perk is just too arduous to reliably use. Why use Road Life when Botany Knowledge or Desperate Measures exists? Botany Knowledge is literally a free perk and provides more reliable healing throughout an entire match. With the introduction of diminishing returns, I don't see Road Life's pick rate going up anytime soon, as the perk is the definition of too convoluted to reliably use. Road Life is a perk that is easily outclassed already, and that's not going away anytime soon. And all of this leads me to my main critique of the diminishing returns system as of the 9.6 PTB. Diminishing returns punishes players for using builds that focus on one area, which indirectly encourages players to use the same strong, safe, meta perk builds. Instead of seeing more fun builds that use perks that rarely see the light of day, the same boring and powerful perks that already cause a lot of frustration will likely just see an increase in their pick rates. And while diminishing returns is still a good idea, will it actually change the way things will be balanced moving forward? As of the 9.6 PTB, diminishing returns only reinforces the DBD balancing issue, where mostly numbers are adjusted instead of achieving more deep-rooted changes. I completely understand that with so many perks and things to balance, numbers are easier to adjust, and as time passes, those same values can be tweaked up or down to fit the current meta, making it even easier. Balancing decisions like perk reworks obviously take more time and consideration. However, with so many reliably strong perks still existing, it would be a nice change of pace for more deep-rooted balance changes to take place. Simple number adjustments and limiting how high or low certain values can reach only accomplishes so much in the short and long term. And while they were widely panned, the anti-tunneling PTBs that were attempted previously at least tried some balancing changes that did not revolve around just some simple number tweaks. However, these same PTBs only further proved how DBD struggles with balance that's not merely increasing or decreasing numbers and perks and powers. And while these PTBs were understandably criticized, there were glimpses of good ideas hidden amongst the bad stuff. There was zero chance those PTBs would make it to live, as there were too many unaccounted for complications just going into the PTB themselves. And speaking of complications, a bonus critique of the diminishing return system is that it overly complicates things for newer players. With time, I'm sure the most dedicated players will learn the ins and outs of the diminishing return system. But what about new players? How does the introduction of this new formula bridge the gap between the least and most experienced? Are new players expected to memorize this formula on top of everything else there is to learn in this game? It really begs the question of when DBD will overhaul their tutorial system. And not even just for new players, but for veteran players as well. Frankly, it would be nice to have a testing range where players could experiment with certain killers or perks that don't involve experimenting on the fly in public matches. Perhaps an improved custom match system in combination with an improved tutorial could pave the way for experimenting or testing things, but as of right now, this remains only as a wish. Overall, DBD and balance complaints are like peanut butter and jelly. It's a combo that will withstand the test of time. While the game will never be fully balanced, it still has plenty to strive for in terms of improvements. And sure, Diminishing Returns could very well be laying the foundation for better perk balance down the road. Am I very cautiously optimistic about the potential with Diminishing Returns? Absolutely. However, until the power of many second chance perks are weakened, Diminishing Returns will have no meaningful impact in most matches. And until the power of skill check builds are weakened, Diminishing Returns will have no meaningful impact in most matches. And until the power of the weakest perks are reevaluated, Diminishing Returns will have no meaningful impact in most matches. That's all I have for now. Thanks for watching.